Are you ready for part three? Part three of The Snow Spider. During those 3 weeks, Gwyn found that he could not broach the subject of his ancestors, though he dwelt constantly on Nain's words. His father remote and silent, his mother in a state of anxiety. But every morning and every evening, Gwyn would open his drawer and take out the yellow scarf. He would stand by his window and run his hand lightly over the soft wall, all the time regarding the bare, snow-capped mountain, and he would think of Bethan. Then one Sunday the wind came. Gwyn knew it was time. "Who are my ancestors?" he asked his mother. "Ancestors?" she said. "Well, no one special that I know of." "No one?" he probed. "Not on my side, love. Your grandfather's a baker, you know. You know that. And before that, well, I don't know. Nothing special." "What about Nain?" Gwyn's father slouched in a chair by the stove, rustled his newspaper, but did not look up. Gwyn screwed up his courage. "What about your ancestors, Dad?" Mr. Griffith peered, unsmiling, over his paper. "What about them?" "Anyone special? Nain said there were magicians in the family, I think." His father shook the newspaper violently. "Nain has some crazy ideas," he said. "I had enough of them when I was a boy." "Made you try and bring a dead bird back to life, you said," his wife reminded him. "How?" asked Gwyn. "Chanting," granted Mr. Griffiths. "They're in the old legends," mused Mrs. Griffiths. "The magicians. One of them made a ship out of seaweed. Gwydion, I think it was called." "Seaweed?" Gwyn broke in. I think it was. And Gwydion? That's my name." Math, Lord of Gwynedd, Gwydion, and Gilfaethwy. And it was Gwydion made the ship. Me, my name. "It's what you were christened. Nain wanted it, but—" Mrs. Griffith glanced in her husband's direction. "Your father never liked it, not when he remembered where it came from, and so we called you Gwyn. Dad was pretty fed up with all Nain's stories." They finished the dishes in silence. Then, with the wind and his ancestors filling his thoughts, Gwyn raced upstairs and opened the drawer. But he did not remove the seaweed. The first thing he noticed was the brooch lying on top of the scarf. He could not remember having replaced it in that way. Surely the scarf was the last thing he had returned to the drawer. The sunlight, slanting through his narrow windows, fell directly on the brooch. Something or somebody wanted him to use the brooch. A sense of urgency gripped him, an overwhelming feeling that today, perhaps within that very hour, something momentous would occur. He had climbed the mountain often, sometimes with Alan, sometimes alone, but the first time had been with Bethan, one summer long ago. It had seemed an impossible task then, when he was not 5 years old, but she had willed him to the top, comforting and cajoling him with her gentle voice. "It's so beautiful when you get there, Gwyn. You can see the whole world, well, the whole of Wales anyway, and the sea and the clouds below you. You won't fall, I won't let you." She had been wearing the yellow scarf that day. Gwyn remembered how it had streamed out across his head like a banner when they reached the top. Gwyn took shelter beside the tallest rock, for the wind sweeping across the plateau threatened to roll him back whence he had come. He must surely have found the place to offer his brooch. "Give it to the wind," Nain had said. Bracing himself against the rock, Gwyn extended his upturned hand into the wind and uncurled his fingers. The brooch was snatched away, so fast that he never saw what became of it. He withdrew his hand and waited for the wind to answer, not knowing what the answer would be, but wanting it to bring him something that would change the way things were, to fill the emptiness of the house below. Gwyn found himself chanting, "Math, Lord of Gwynedd, Gwydion, and Gilfaethwy." This he repeated over and over again, not knowing whether he was calling to the living or the dead. And all the while, huge snowflakes drifted silently about him, melting as they touched him, so that he did not turn into the snowman he might otherwise have become. Gwyn stood motionless for what seemed like hours, enveloped in a soft, serene whiteness, waiting for an answer. Yet, had Nain promised him an answer? In the stillness, he thought he heard a sound, very high and light, like icicles on glass. His legs began to ache, his face grew numb with cold, and when night clouds darkened the sky, he began his descent, resentful and forlorn. It was dark when he got home. Before opening the back door, he stamped his boots. His absence from the farm all day would not be appreciated, he realised. He raised his hands to brush his shoulders free of the dust he usually managed to collect, and his fingers encountered something icy cold. Believing it to be a snowflake, or even an icicle, Gwyn plucked it off his shoulder and moved closer to the kitchen window to examine what he had found. It was a snowflake, the most beautiful he had ever seen, for it was magnified into an exquisite and intricate pattern, a star glistening like crystal in the soft light. And then the most extraordinary thing happened. The star began to move, and Gwyn stared amazed as it gradually assumed the shape of a tiny silver spider. Had the wind heard him after all? Was he a magician then? With some difficulty, Gwyn managed to remove his boots with his left hand. "I'm just going upstairs," he said airily. "Gwyn, whatever are you up to?" asked his mother. "Wash your hands and sit down." "I've got to go upstairs," Gwyn insisted. "But Gwyn, please, ma'am." Mrs. Griffith shrugged and turned back to the stove. Her husband had begun to chew bacon and was not interested in Gwyn's hasty flight through the kitchen. Tumbling into his bedroom, Gwyn scanned the place for something in which to hide his spider. He could think of nothing but the drawer. Placing the spider gently onto the yellow scarf, he pushed the drawer back, leaving a few centimetres for air, then fled downstairs. He got an interrogation in the kitchen. Mrs. Griffiths began it. "Whatever made you run off like that this afternoon?" she complained. "Didn't you hear me call?" "No, it was windy," Gwyn replied cheerfully. He thought impatiently of the drawer in his room while his mother chattered on about Christmas and the cockerel. Then, excusing himself with a quick hug, Gwyn left his mother to talk to the cat, and trying not to show an unnatural enthusiasm for bed, crossed the passage and climbed the stairs slowly, but two at a time. His bedroom door was open, and there appeared to be a soft glow within. On entering the room, Gwyn froze. There were shadows on the wall. 7 helmeted figures motionless beside his bed. He turned fearfully to locate the source of light. It came from behind a row of toy spacemen standing on the chest of drawers. Gwyn breathed a sigh of relief and approached the spaceman. The silver spider had climbed out of the drawer. It was glowing in the dark. Gwyn brushed his toys aside and hesitantly held out his hand to the spider. It crawled onto his open palm, and gently he raised it closer to his face. The spider's touch was icy cold, and yet the glow that it shed on his face had a certain strange warmth that seemed to penetrate every part of his body. He held the spider for several minutes, admiring the exquisite pattern on its back and wondering whether there was more to the tiny creature than a superficial beauty. It had come in exchange for the brooch, of that he was certain. But was it really he who had transformed the brooch? Or had the extraordinary spider come from a place beyond this world? He resolved to keep it a secret until he could consult his grandmother the following evening. Replacing the spider in the drawer, Gwyn went downstairs to fetch a book. When he returned, the glow came from the bedpost. Deciding that he had no need of an electric light, he sat on the bed and read his book beside the spider. It was an exceptional sensation, reading by spiderlight. End of part 3.